Growing up, my mom had three kids: my twin sister Lily, me, Ava, 26F, and our younger brother Aaron. Lily and I weren't identical twins. We were fraternal, and that always seemed to set the tone for our childhood. From the start, I felt treated differently, not just because I looked different from Lily, but because I looked so different from my mom. Lily, on the other hand, was practically a mirror image of our mom when she was younger. Mom was stunning, and Lily inherited those looks. Naturally, Mom adored her and poured all her energy into shaping Lily into a miniature version of herself. For years, I tried desperately to get Mom's attention. As a kid, I mimicked her and Lily, hoping to fit in, but it only made them laugh at me. By the time I reached my teens, I gave up entirely and accepted my place in our family dynamic. Luckily, I had Aaron. He was the light of my life, and even as a child, he adored me for who I was. His love became my safe haven, especially as our family dynamics grew more complicated. Mom and Dad had married young, both were 23, and it wasn't exactly a love story. They were pressured into marriage because Mom was pregnant. Before that, Mom had dreams of becoming a model, and for a while she pursued that dream. But after Lily and I came along, she put those aspirations aside to be a stay-at-home mom. Sadly, Dad passed away in a car accident 6 years into their marriage. I was only a kid, and the memories of him are faint, but I remember the sadness that blanketed our house during that time. After Dad's death, Mom had to find a way to support us. She started working again and eventually met Steve, the man who would become our stepdad. 3 years after Dad's passing, they got married, and Steve became a steady presence in our lives. He was kind, and although he wasn't perfect, he made an effort to include me. He even stood up for me occasionally, encouraging Mom to treat me better. Sometimes it worked. But his greatest gift to me was Aaron. My little brother Aaron came along when I was 12, and from the moment he was born, he became my everything. I don't think I would have survived my teenage years without him. We were close, and his unconditional love made me feel less isolated in a family where I often felt invisible. Steve passed away a few years ago from cardiac arrest. He was only in his late 50s, but his heart problems had plagued him for years, so while his death was devastating, it wasn't entirely unexpected. Mom, however, had another devastating curveball for us shortly after, a diagnosis of stomach cancer. She fought hard for a couple of years, but 6 weeks ago we lost her too. When Mom was diagnosed, I moved back home to help out, but it quickly became clear that I wasn't her priority. She only wanted Lily by her side while I was there to take care of Aaron. It stung, but I couldn't argue. Aaron needed stability, and moving him out of the house at that time would have been cruel. Despite the pain of being treated like a caretaker rather than a daughter, I stayed. Those 2 years were emotionally exhausting. Mom's focus remained on Lily, while I juggled managing Aaron's life and trying to keep things running smoothly. When Mom passed, Aaron and I were heartbroken. She had her flaws, but Aaron loved her deeply, and I knew this loss would leave a lasting mark on him. Lily's reaction, however, was shocking. She seemed completely unaffected, going about her life as if nothing had happened. Just a week after Mom's passing, her lawyer informed us of Mom's will, and it was no surprise that Lily was left with almost everything. Aaron's future was secured with a trust fund set up from Steve's estate, and as for me, all I received was Mom's old wedding ring, a sentimental but modest keepsake. At the reading, Lily's reaction floored me. Instead of gratitude, she rolled her eyes at the news, even when told that Mom had left her personal letters. The lawyer looked taken aback, but I couldn't hold my tongue any longer. Once the lawyer left, I asked her what was going on. That's when Lily dropped a bombshell. She hated our mom. Hearing Lily confess her hatred for Mom was baffling. I always thought she was the favorite child, but as Lily opened up, I began to understand the weight she'd been carrying. From a young age, Mom had micromanaged every aspect of Lily's life, forcing her to eat, dress, and even think in ways that aligned with Mom's vision of a perfect daughter. Lily confessed that she only played along because she feared being treated like me. While staying on Mom's good side had its benefits, it also meant sacrificing her own identity and dreams. For the first time, I saw my sister in a new light. Her life wasn't as perfect as it seemed, and while it didn't erase years of resentment, It helped me empathize with her struggle. That moment felt like a turning point for us, a rare, genuine connection. I thought things might change between us, but that hope didn't last long. A few days later, Lily announced she wanted Aaron and me to move out immediately. She wanted to move her boyfriend in and thought having us there would be awkward. I was stunned. Aaron had just lost his mom, and uprooting him so soon would have been cruel. Besides, I had just ended the lease on my apartment and needed time to find a new place. I tried reasoning with her, suggesting that Aaron and I could stay for just a couple more years until he finished high school. But Lily wouldn't budge. The house was hers now, and she made it clear that we were no longer welcome. It hurt, but I couldn't stay where we weren't wanted. The next day, Aaron and I packed up and left, moving in temporarily with a friend. Though Aaron took the news well, I could see how deeply it hurt him to leave the only home he'd ever known. That night, I promised myself I'd never depend on Lily again. But life, as always, had other plans. After moving out, I focused on getting Aaron settled. My friend was kind enough to let us stay in her spare room while I searched for a new apartment. It wasn't ideal, her place was cramped, and the commute to my job was long, but it was close to Aaron's school, and that was my top priority. He was already dealing with enough after losing Mom. I didn't want to add a school change to the mix. Aaron, being the amazing kid he is, adjusted better than I expected. He didn't complain about the situation, even though I could tell he was struggling. We spent our evenings talking about school, his friends, and memories of Mom. Those conversations were bittersweet, but they helped both of us heal in small ways. Meanwhile, I was busy juggling work and apartment hunting. I also started thinking seriously about switching to a work-from-home position. My company offered that flexibility, and with everything going on, it seemed like the best choice. I just needed to clear it with my manager, who was thankfully understanding. Then, out of the blue, Lily called me. It had only been about a week since we'd moved out, and I hadn't expected to hear from her so soon. Her voice on the phone was shaky, almost hysterical. At first, I thought something had happened to her, but then she blurted out the reason for her call. She had made a huge mistake and needed my help. Apparently, while clearing out Mom's belongings to make space for her boyfriend. Lily had accidentally given away a jewelry box that belonged to Mom. It wasn't just any box, it contained expensive jewelry Mom had collected over the years. Lily had handed it off to her boyfriend's sister without realizing what was inside. And now that she knew, she was panicking because the sister refused to give it back. I was baffled. "Why are you calling me about this?" I asked. "Shouldn't you talk to a lawyer?" Lily hesitated before explaining that she couldn't go that route. Her boyfriend had warned her against involving lawyers, saying it would ruin his family's reputation. To make matters worse, he threatened to break up with her if she pursued it legally. She was stuck, scared of losing both her relationship and her business partnership with him. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This was Lily's mess, and yet she thought I'd swoop in to fix it for her. She begged me to intervene, claiming I was her only option. I was furious, not just at her, but at the situation. After everything she had put me and Aaron through, now she wanted my help? I told her to handle her own problems and hung up. Blocking her number felt dramatic, but I needed the peace. I wasn't about to let her drag me into her drama. Still, the call left me shaken. It wasn't the first time Lily had acted selfishly, but this was a new low. I kept reminding myself that I had no obligation to help her, especially after how she'd treated us. Over the next few days, I focused on Aaron and tried to push Lily's nonsense out of my mind. But then she found another way to reach me, this time through my work email. She must have looked it up online because I hadn't shared it with her. The email was long, a mix of apologies and pleas for help. In the first half, she admitted she'd been selfish, explaining that her behavior after Mom's death was fueled by years of resentment. She claimed she was tired of putting her dreams on hold for the family and just wanted to live her life. While I understood her frustration, it didn't excuse the way she'd treated us. The second half of the email was all about the jewelry. Lily confessed she was terrified of the legal repercussions because Mom's estate was still in probate. She was scared she'd get into serious trouble for giving away the jewelry, especially since it was technically part of the estate. But instead of talking to the lawyer like a sensible person, she wanted me to step in and convince her boyfriend's sister to return it. Reading her email made me angrier than before. How could she expect me to clean up her mess? I didn't even know her boyfriend or his sister, and I certainly wasn't interested in getting involved in their family drama. Her boyfriend sounded like a nightmare. He wasn't contributing financially to the business he and Lily were supposedly starting together, and now he was siding with his sister over Lily. From what Lily described, his sister had no intention of returning the jewelry, despite knowing it wasn't hers. It felt like they were taking advantage of Lily's fear and indecision. The more I thought about it, the less I understood why Lily didn't just cut her losses. If her boyfriend and his sister were this toxic, why was she so desperate to keep them in her life? It wasn't my place to fix her relationships, and I wasn't about to get dragged into her chaos. I responded to her email with a simple message: "Talk to a lawyer. Don't contact me again." Then, I blocked her email address too. For the next week, things were quiet. Aaron and I started settling into our temporary living arrangement, and I made progress on finding an apartment nearby. My friend continued to be a lifesaver, letting us stay as long as we needed. Aaron seemed happier, and I was starting to feel like we were getting back on track. Then Lily showed up at my friend's house. I didn't know how she found me, but there she was, standing on the doorstep with tears in her eyes. My friend and I were sitting in the living room when she knocked, and the sight of her made my stomach drop. I didn't want to cause a scene in front of my friend, so I stepped outside to talk to her. Lily started apologizing the moment I closed the door behind me. She begged me to give her another chance, saying she'd do anything to prove she was sorry. Her desperation caught me off guard. For a moment, I considered hearing her out. When I asked what she meant by proving it, she hesitated before making an offer. If I helped her deal with the jewelry situation, she would split Mom's inheritance with me once it was finalized. Her offer left me speechless. Was she serious? The inheritance was significant, and I couldn't deny that it would help me and Aaron immensely. Still, I didn't trust her. Not yet. "If we do this," I said, "we're drawing up a legal agreement. I'm not taking your word for it." To my surprise, Lily agreed without hesitation. For the first time in years, it felt like she was genuinely trying to make amends. I told her I'd think about it and let her know. As I watched her walk away, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something much more complicated. For Aaron's sake, I decided to give her one last chance. But I wasn't going to let my guard down, not yet. After a lot of back and forth in my mind, I decided to give Lily a chance, not for her, but for me and Aaron. The promise of splitting the inheritance wasn't something I could ignore, especially with the financial strain I was under trying to secure a new apartment and make sure Aaron had everything he needed. But I made one thing clear to her: this wouldn't be on her terms. We were doing it my way, or not at all. The next day, Lily came back to my friend's house with the paperwork for our agreement. To her credit, she didn't try to argue or negotiate. She seemed genuinely desperate, which made me both suspicious and a little sad for her. I read the documents carefully, and everything was in order. Once I signed them, it was official. She couldn't back out of splitting the inheritance. That gave me some peace of mind. With that hurdle cleared, I agreed to help her confront her boyfriend and his sister about the jewelry. Honestly, I still didn't understand why Lily couldn't just do it herself. She claimed it was because of the emotional weight of the situation, but a part of me wondered if she was just scared of standing up to them. Whatever her reasons, I knew this wasn't going to be easy. Before we went to meet them, I did a little digging. I searched for her boyfriend and his sister on social media, hoping to get a sense of who they were. They seemed normal enough, no red flags or shady behavior that I could find. Still, something didn't sit right with me. If they were decent people, why wouldn't they just return the jewelry? It wasn't theirs, and they knew it. Lily and I arrived at her boyfriend's house late in the afternoon. The air was thick with tension as we walked up to the door. I could feel Lily's nerves radiating off her, but I kept my focus. If she couldn't handle this, I would. Her boyfriend, Mark, answered the door. He was a tall, broad-shouldered man in his early 30s, and his expression darkened the moment he saw me standing next to Lily. Without even letting us in, he started grilling Lily about why I was there. She stumbled over her words, trying to explain, but I cut in. "We're here to talk about the jewelry. I said, keeping my tone firm. It's a straightforward issue. The box belongs to Lily as part of her mother's estate, and we need it returned. Mark's reaction was immediate and explosive. He started shouting, accusing Lily of trying to ruin his family's reputation. His words were laced with venom, and it was clear he wasn't just angry. He was furious. As his voice rose, Lily shrank back, her hands trembling at her sides. I stood my ground, refusing to let him intimidate me. This isn't about anyone's reputation, I said sharply. It's about doing the right thing. The box doesn't belong to your sister, and you know it. That only made him angry. He began pacing, throwing out accusations and insults, most of them directed at Lily. It was horrifying to watch. I'd known he wasn't a great guy, but seeing him like this made me realize just how toxic he was. At one point, he turned on me, calling me names and questioning my character for getting involved in something that wasn't my business. I could feel my blood boiling, but I refused to let him bait me into a shouting match. Instead, I focused on staying calm and logical. If it's not my business, I said evenly, then it's certainly not your sister's. The box belongs to Lily, period. If you don't return it, we'll take legal action. That seemed to strike a nerve. For a moment, he stopped pacing and stared at me, his jaw clenched. Then, with a string of curses, he stormed out of the room to call his sister Dot. The next 30 minutes were some of the most uncomfortable of my life. While we waited for his sister to arrive, Mark continued to rant, taking every opportunity to belittle Lily. She stood silently in the corner, tears streaming down her face, and I realized just how deeply trapped she was in this relationship. It wasn't just about the jewelry. It was about the years of emotional abuse she had endured. When Mark's sister finally arrived, she looked annoyed, like we were wasting her time. She carried the jewelry box in her hands, but made it clear she wasn't happy about returning it. "I don't see why this is such a big deal," she said, shoving the box toward Lily. "If it was so important, you shouldn't have given it away." Lily took the box with shaking hands, mumbling a quiet thank you. I wanted to say something sharp, but I bit my tongue. The important thing was that we got the jewelry back. As we turned to leave, Mark unleashed one final tirade, yelling at Lily and calling her every horrible name under the sun. Then, in front of both of us, he told her he was done with her. "Don't come back," he spat. "We're over." Lily tried to stop him, grabbing his arm and begging him to reconsider, but he pushed her away and stormed out of the house. She collapsed into a sobbing heap on the floor, clutching the jewelry box like it was her lifeline. For a moment, I just stood there, unsure of what to do. Part of me wanted to leave her there, let her deal with the fallout of her choices. But the sight of her broken and vulnerable reminded me of all the times I'd felt that way growing up, ignored, rejected, unworthy. No matter how much anger I'd felt toward her, I couldn't just walk away. I crouched down beside her, putting a hand on her shoulder. "It's going to be okay," I said softly. "You don't need him. You're stronger than you think." Lily didn't respond right away, but eventually she nodded. She wiped her tears and stood up, her grip on the jewelry box still tight. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." We left together, and for the first time in years, I felt like there was a glimmer of hope for our relationship. But I knew this was just the beginning of a long road to healing. For both of us. The ride back to my friend's house was silent. Lily stared out the window, holding the jewelry box like it was the only solid thing left in her life. I wasn't sure what to say to her, and honestly, I didn't feel like talking. My mind was still spinning from everything that had happened at Mark's house. After we arrived, I led Lily to a bench outside and sat with her. She still looked shaken, but there was a quiet determination in her eyes. "I don't know how I let things get this bad," she said softly. Her voice wavered, but there was a weight to her words that made me stop and really listen. For the next hour, Lily opened up to me in a way she never had before. She told me about her relationship with Mark, how it had started out fine but slowly turned toxic. He was controlling, constantly criticizing her and making her feel small. She hadn't even realized how bad it was until recently, but by then, she felt trapped, financially, emotionally, and socially. "He always made me feel like I owed him something," she said, her fingers tracing the edges of the jewelry box. "Like I wasn't good enough without him. And when I gave him control over my life, I didn't even notice it was happening. It just happened. Listening to her, I felt a mix of emotions. Sympathy for what she'd been through, anger at Mark for how he treated her, and frustration at Lily for letting it go on for so long. But most of all, I felt sad. Sad that my sister, who I'd always envied for being Mom's favorite, had spent so much of her life feeling just as trapped and invisible as I had. For the first time, I saw her not as the golden child, but as a woman who'd been carrying her own invisible burdens. It didn't excuse her behavior toward me and Aaron, but it made me realize that she wasn't the enemy I'd built up in my mind. She was just another person trying to figure things out like the rest of us. "You don't have to live like this," I told her gently. "You deserve better than Mark, and better than what Mom put you through. You're allowed to live your own life, Lily." She nodded slowly, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I know. I just don't know where to start." That was the thing about breaking free. It wasn't easy, and it didn't happen overnight. But I told her the truth. The fact that she recognized the problem was the first step. The rest would take time, and it would be messy, but it was possible. We sat there for a while longer, the tension between us slowly easing. For the first time in years, I felt like we were actually connecting. It wasn't perfect, and there were still a lot of unresolved issues between us, but it was a start. Later that night, after Lily left, I talked to Aaron about everything that had happened. He was quieter than usual, listening intently as I explained the situation. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms, a thoughtful expression on his face. "So, does this mean you and Lily are okay now?" he asked. I hesitated, unsure how to answer. "I don't know if we're okay, but we're trying. It's complicated." Aaron nodded, his expression softening. "I think that's good. I mean, it's better than not trying at all, right?" His words stayed with me long after we finished talking. Aaron had always been wise beyond his years, and he had a way of cutting through the noise and seeing things clearly. He was right. It was better to try than to stay stuck in the past. Over the next few weeks, Lily and I kept in touch. She started therapy, something I never thought she'd do, and began taking steps to disentangle herself from Mark. She sold some of the jewelry from the box, pieces that didn't hold sentimental value, to pay off her debts and gain financial independence. It was a bold move, and I couldn't help but feel a flicker of pride watching her take control of her life. Meanwhile, I was making progress on my own front. With my friend's help, I found a small apartment close to Aaron's school. It wasn't fancy, but it was ours, and that was all that mattered. Aaron seemed relieved to have a space of his own again, and seeing him happy made all the stress and sleepless nights worth it. One afternoon, Lily called me, sounding more upbeat than I'd heard her in years. "Hey," she said, "I just wanted to let you know that the inheritance is almost finalized. Once everything's settled, I'll transfer your share." I was surprised by how casual she sounded, as if this were just a regular part of her day. "Thanks," I said, unsure what else to say. "I appreciate it." "No, I mean it," she added. "I know I've been awful to you and Aaron, and I can't change that. But I want to make things right, even if it takes a while." Her words felt genuine, and for the first time, I allowed myself to believe that maybe, just maybe, we could build something new out of the wreckage of our past. It wouldn't be easy, and it wouldn't happen overnight. But like I'd told Lily weeks earlier, recognizing the problem was the first step. The rest was up to us. As I hung up the phone, I glanced over at Aaron, who was sprawled on the couch doing homework. He looked up and smiled, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like everything was going to be okay. We were all a little broken, but maybe, just maybe, we were starting to heal. The weeks after Lily's call were some of the calmest I'd had in a long time. It felt like we were finally moving toward a new normal, one where we weren't constantly at odds with each other, and where Aaron and I could focus on building a life that felt stable and safe. Lily kept her promise about the inheritance. Once the legalities were finalized, she wired me my share. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to breathe easier for the first time in years. I used part of it to pay off lingering bills and save for Aaron's future, and the rest went toward making our new apartment feel like home. Aaron was thriving too. He'd settled into a rhythm at school, and while he still missed Mom, he seemed lighter. like the weight of our old family dynamics wasn't pressing down on him anymore. We talked often about the future, and I could see him starting to believe that things would be okay, even without Mom or the house we'd grown up in. A's for Lily, she was working hard to turn her life around. Therapy seemed to be helping her unpack years of pressure and trauma, and she was slowly rebuilding her confidence. She even cut ties with Mark for good, something I honestly hadn't expected her to do. It was messy and painful, but she stuck to her decision, and I respected her for that. One day, she showed up at my apartment with a box in her hands. "This is for you," she said, holding it out awkwardly. I raised an eyebrow, taking the box from her. "What's this?" "It's some of Mom's stuff," she said, her voice soft. "I know she didn't leave you much in the will, but I found these things while I was going through her stuff, and I thought you might want them." I opened the box carefully. Inside were small, sentimental items, old photographs, handwritten notes, and a few pieces of Mom's jewelry that Lily had decided not to sell. There was even a recipe book that Mom used to swear by, its pages worn and stained from years of use. For a moment, I couldn't speak. These weren't expensive things, but they meant more to me than any inheritance ever could. "Thank you," I said finally, my throat tight. Lily shrugged, her expression unreadable. "It's nothing. I just thought you should have them." That gesture marked a turning point for us. It wasn't like we suddenly became best friends or anything, but it felt like the walls between us were starting to come down. We began spending more time together, not because we had to, but because we wanted to. She came over for dinner a few times, and Aaron even started warming up to her again. One evening, as we sat around the table laughing over one of Aaron's silly stories, I realized how much things had changed. For years, our family had been a mess, fractured by favoritism, resentment, and unspoken hurts. But now, there was something different. It wasn't perfect, and it never would be. But it was real. We were rebuilding, one small step at a time. Months passed, and life settled into a new rhythm. Aaron and I found our groove in the apartment, and I adjusted to working from home. It wasn't always easy. There were still moments when the weight of everything we'd been through felt overwhelming. But we were making it work. Lily, to her credit, stayed true to her word about wanting to make amends. She invited us over to her house a few times, though Aaron and I were careful about how much time we spent there. It was still hard for me to be in the place where so much of our family's dysfunction had played out, but I appreciated the effort she was making. One day, while I was helping Aaron with his homework, my phone buzzed with a text from Lily. Lily, "Hey, I'm thinking about selling Mom's house. It's too big for just me, and I don't need all the space. What do you think?" I stared at the message for a long time. The house had been such a central part of our lives, good memories and bad, but I couldn't argue with her logic. It wasn't practical for her to stay there, and selling it would give her a chance to fully move forward. Me. "I think it's a good idea. Do what feels right for you." Her response came almost immediately. Lily, "Thanks. I just didn't want to make the decision without asking you first." That small act of consideration meant more to me than I could put into words. It felt like Lily was finally learning how to be the sister I'd always wanted, a partner, not a rival. When the house eventually sold, Lily called me to tell me how bittersweet it felt to let it go. "It's weird," she said. "I thought I'd feel free, but it just feels sad." "I get that," I said. "But sometimes letting go is the only way to move forward." She was quiet for a moment before replying. "Thanks, Ava, for everything. Now, looking back on everything, it's hard to believe how much has changed. What started as a family broken by loss and resentment has become something new, imperfect but hopeful. Lily and I are still figuring things out, and Aaron continues to be the glue that holds us all together. There are days when I wonder how Mom would feel about all of this. Part of me thinks she'd be surprised to see us getting along, but another part of me hopes she'd be proud. Not because we're perfect, but because we're trying. And for the first time in a long time, that feels like enough. Story 2. It's time to raise a chair. In the lounge today, we have another fantastic story for you. Ever ponder what life could have been like if circumstances had been different? If given the opportunity, a girl in the lounge now may have had a happy childhood. The judge shuts down the entitled ex. Last month, something occurred. First of all, I don't speak English as my first language. Second comma, I'll start by posting a narrative that occurred in court, after which the backstory will be flagged as unsafe for work because of some of the language. The local sheriff gave me legal papers back in July. When I opened it, my ex-girlfriend Clara was listed as the plaintiff. To find out what's going on with his sister, I call her brother, who is still a close friend of mine. Because of the stress that resulted from our split, he doesn't communicate with his sister, but he talks to his father and looks after him. So he gave him a call. He had informed his father that I was semi-retired, had quit my work, and had moved out of the Tidewater region. After telling his daughter this, the father gave the impression that he was completely loaded. Make sure our daughter is in my will, he instructed her. I engaged the local lawyer after posting an article about the problem, and I also connected him with the lawyer who wrote the will. It's court time now. Only Claire is on the plaintiff's side, while my lawyer and I are on the defendant's. An elderly woman serves as the village judge. It, quote, "s more obvious." Why are we at this place today? We didn't have much to go on because of the manner this was submitted. Is he aware of you, child support? Child support ceased 10 years ago, Miss Judge. I want to make sure my kid is getting the care she needs, Miss Judge, after he passes away. It's not a miss, incidentally. It, quote, "s, Your Honor." How are you going to ensure the welfare of your daughter? I argued that his will be read, miss. Did you have to make sure my daughter was included if she wasn't? The judge gives an eye roll. Mr. Sweet, I noticed that you have Joe as your lawyer. Indeed, Your Honor. That's amazing. By any way, Mr. Joe, do you have a documented question? After speaking with the plaintiff's brother, my client learned that this paper may be the crux of the problem. For Your Honor, we also have the lawyer who wrote the paper available for a video conversation. This is the file. All right, I'll look into this a little while we're at recess. Before I go, Miss Clara, could you kindly provide your daughter's entire name and social security number, just to make sure I have all the details? Indeed, Your Honor. Blah, 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 it's McKinley. Thank you. Don't go too, please. As the judge exits the courtroom, Clara is staring at me with this savage, scum-eating smile. We are summoned back to the courtroom 4 hours later. The X is still beaming broadly. All right, Miss Clara. Where does your daughter now reside? Now remember, I've had the sheriff and my clerk look into this during recess. They have their eyes on the ground. State prison in Louisiana. Where will she be after that? Federal prison in Alabama. In summary, she opted to shoot at state and federal authorities while attempting to cross state boundaries with narcotics. Got into a car pursuit in a stolen vehicle and injured 3 people. She was sentenced to life in Alabama and 20 years in Louisiana. You filed a pointless lawsuit before this court, Miss Clara. Since Mr. Sweet is still alive and well, you have no right to view this paper. The paper was not even read by me. Therefore, you cannot tell me her income. You must now pay the court expenses in addition to the fact that I won't inform you, and the lawyer for Mr. Sweet. What court do I then need to submit this with? Even if you take your case all the way to the Supreme Court, they will still reject it. The court adjourned. $5,000 is the total amount owed, since the Hampton lawyer was also getting paid for this. This is the history of how we got here. And no, our estate isn't giving her a single penny or anything. In 1990, Claire and I met in Florida. She worked as a server at a restaurant in the area. I once needed a ride to go feed her horses as I was leaving at the conclusion of her shift. I did, therefore, give him a ride. We spoke and clicked immediately when I hung out with them. She was 19 and I was 20. She moved in with me in my Hollywood flat a month later. Everything was going okay until she spent all of our savings on equine-related items in 1992. Then, while pregnant, she was fired from the diner. What caused her to be absent 3 days in a row in August 1992? Her daughter was born. I was working 3 separate job sites 7 days a week and seldom saw them in a week by the time we had her baby. I stopped and needed a vacation since there were 4 fatalities on 2 locations. We were having serious financial difficulties when I truly began to examine those areas of our lives. She had to go pay the rent for the previous 3 months because I was always at work. She was taking it to a psychic, but she hadn't paid the rent. In the end, we moved in with our parents. Her father forced her to part with the 2 horses and all of the equipment she had purchased. In 2 years, she had spent a total of $30. We had spent time together. She retained the $8,000 that we recovered during the breakup. We had no health insurance when my daughter was born. Her mother so advised her to enter as a single parent. A bad concept. Later in life, when she had the baby, that really got to me. Because he is in the Navy and wanted to be near his kid, Claire's brother, who was stationed in Norfolk, Virginia, Dad is moved to Virginia Beach, Virginia. Dad and I move up a month after Mom and Clara. After a week of their being there, I receive a call informing me that Clara wants to end our relationship. Well, shit. I'm still trying to get back on track and spend more time with my daughter. We became great friends and ended up staying with Clara's brother, Cody. I had to prepare him each weekend. It involved providing $125 every week in support for my ex. I eventually gave up on attempting to mend my relationship with the ex because of the amount of turmoil she was causing. Her brother was supporting me while I was sending her money, but she was telling her father that I never gave her any money to support the baby. Remember, I was earning $225 a week from 1993 to 1995. Our amicable arrangement ended when Mom was given a stage 4 cancer diagnosis and passed away 4 months later if I didn't do any side job. She packed up everything we owned and moved in with a new lover she had met a few times 2 weeks after Mom's death. She was offered the world by an out-of-town welder if she accompanied him to North Carolina. After a trip, Dad returned home to scatter his wife's ashes in an empty house. I was informed of the news by Cody. When I informed my girlfriend, who is now my wife, about the issue, she was really understanding. Her goal was to assist me in regaining my daughter. In 1996, we were married. It wasn't until '97 that Claire phoned me. I gave her the $18 she requested so I could talk to my kid. After less than 5 minutes of our conversation, Clara snatched the phone and told me that I would need to pay more money if I wanted additional time. Cody and the wife were furious when I told them this. She essentially urged her, "Let's go to court," and called a couple more times to want money. Each time she would end the call. She lived in the Tampa, Florida area, according to the private investigator I hired. All of the lawyers I sought to employ turned down my case. In 1998, I traveled to Tampa by car. I had to go before a family court judge who laughed me out of court by declaring that I had no family claim. Let's fast forward to 2006. She is 13 years old. When my father calls, he informs me that McKinley is in problems at school since she is only in the 5th grade and would repeat the situation if nothing is done. Since my wife works as a teacher. He thinks she would be better off staying with us. The wife consents to take her in and visit a psychiatrist to see whether she is being held back by trauma or ADHD. This is the nightmare she had during her visit. After removing the safety bar from the bunk bed, she stole from practically every teacher, causing her sister to break her arm. Telling horror stories to her sister, she kept them up till midnight. She would physically attack them if they refused to listen. The last straw was that she decided to shoot the 6-year-old after obtaining a gun from a local boy when she was 14. She received a few shots, but the babysitter tackled her down after the gun jammed. Clara had to pick her up from the mental hospital after she was taken there by police after they were called. In the end, Sarah filed for and received $250 per month in child support. The judge informed her that she could only receive 20% of my income, despite her desire to return to at least $400. The fact that this 14-year-old was caught having sex with a 55-year-old man and was charged with breaking and entering, grand larceny, and grand theft auto 15 made things even worse. He was imprisoned after Claire's unsuccessful attempt at blackmail failed. 16 was charged with beating a disabled student in a wheelchair at school. 17 drug-related charges. 18. I emailed her a copy of the family cookbook we had created, and she replied with a picture of it burning. She claimed she didn't care about this family nonsense, and that it was just a bank account from which to draw. Each time she was charged, she ended up in a mental health facility. They were furious that I consistently refused Clara's requests for bail money, but I made sure she had all the assistance she needed and that the bill was paid. Page 21. She was 24 when she graduated from high school. She had 2 children. When I tried to get custody of my grandchildren after learning that Clara had tried to abduct them, the state put a squash on the family, and they both ended up in foster care, possessing any custody during the previous 3 decades. I've experienced hell and back, My wife has witnessed my complete breakdown during this ordeal and has only been encouraging to me. If she receives anything from her state, I'll be damned. Although I don't know their names or locations, I would leave something to my grandchildren. Here are a few responses from the public. I want to start by sincerely apologizing for everything you and your wife have endured. I wonder how much better her life would have been if you had custody of her daughter. You obviously wanted to limit your access to your child and were making a concerted effort to be involved in her life. Very selfishly, causing long-term damage to both you and your child, and obviously use your daughter to receive money. Your daughter was clearly raised to view you only as a moneymaker, not a father. This is just so heartbreaking to read. It's a very tragic story, but I do hope you find your grandchildren and maybe get an opportunity to have the chance to have some kind of relationship with them one day. Another person adds their voice. I had an ex come at me for alimony to the tune of $10,000 a month, because that is what her friend was getting, and she felt entitled to that sum as well. The part she left out was that her friend was married to a neurosurgeon who made that kind of money, and not the measly amount I was making. The judge almost literally laughed her out of court. I'm sorry, OP, this is an all-around, not great situation for anybody. It's honestly too bad that you couldn't get your hands on your daughter earlier in your life. I quote, sure, her life would have looked immensely different. It's unfortunate that she ended up on that path, likely due to her mother and her mother's lifestyle. He tried your best, and honestly, there's not much else you could have done. It's unfortunate that the judges and the law usually take the side of the mother, even though the mothers can be and have been unfit to parent. So sorry to hear all about this, OP. What are your thoughts on all this? Thank you for following along today in your lounge. Before you go, be sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell. If you have something you want to share regarding today's content, we want to hear it. See you next time.